Hi, Gloria Liebecker here with Healing You. What's it like for you when you feel disappointment? And what have you noticed it's like for your child? In my experience, disappointment can feel crushing to them, especially when it's around something they've been looking forward to for a while. Homeschooling my youngest and getting to arrange time to hang out with friends wasn't as often as it had been for my older children who attended public schools. I remember the time that, I think he was about 12, maybe. And he came running through the room and he was just shocked with the disappointment. And he ran across to his room and he flung himself across his bed. And he's like, but we had planned in advance. It's not fair. So there was key, planning in advance. So back in that time, or stepping through time to be with that moment, I remember taking the time to pause and be with my own visceral experience and notice my heart started to race and my breathing was shallow. So I placed my hand on my heart and I closed my eyes so I could focus inward. And focusing on my breath and tracking my body sensations, I noticed that my gut was clenched and my shoulders were tight. And there was the flavor of an emotion that was like so near panic and despair. So being able to take the time to dip into those sensations and name the emotions silently to myself, I could feel a release of the pain. And I also named to myself how much I valued heart connection and harmony. And as I did that, my heart rate slowed and my shoulders relaxed. And it was like I felt solid ground under my feet again. So I went into his room and I sat beside Rylan and I laid my hand on his back. And I could feel those waves of emotion as they rolled through him. And it was like shock waves on my own heart and soul. So using silent empathy, I silently acknowledged just how shocking it must be for him when he heard his friend's mom cancel coming over due to an unexpected snowstorm. I also silently named just how much he needed consistency, predictability, and the joy and the fun of friendship. And as I sat with him silently, the depth of his mourning just pierced my heart. And then the pitch of his cries impaled my ears. And I could feel myself then sliding into overwhelm. So I slowly moved away from his side as I told him, Mommy needs to take a little space for a moment or two. So I retreated to the basement and got some laundry to take up to systematically begin to fold it as I tuned into my inner experience again. And I then began to hear the storyboard that I was telling myself. It was something like, oh, it's just too hard. It's too much. It's too loud, way too loud. And tears sprang to my eyes as I held the resonant waves of those big emotional energy that was emanated from my son. The depth of his despair and the need for mourning. We can't mourn on our own. We need accompaniment for that. So I took a moment to ask this tender part of myself, is it that you would like to remain fully present within your sense of self in order to be able to provide the one who is your son consistent, resonant attunement and support? And before I could go any further, Rylan walked into the room. He sat on the couch and he calmly looked up at me. And he tipped his head ever so slightly. And he said, now, mother, was that a little thing or a big thing? As I met his gaze, I felt this shift into surprise and relief sprang up within me. I said, thank you for asking. Let's see. Well, it seems a little thing until it happens repeatedly, and then suddenly it feels quite big. I said, but thanks for asking. I really like your question. And spontaneously, I reached out and I invited him to shake my hand. And I said, have we met before? I think we've met previously. And your name is? And he smiled, and just slightly, as he politely shook my hand, he said, Rylan. I said, how old are you? Yes, he said, 12, almost 13. I said, I am so pleased to meet you. I've seen you around once in a while, but there's something really different happening here. This is the very first time that you have initiated a conversation with me like this. I'd really like to have more conversations with you and spend more time with you. Is that a possibility? Then he smiled wide, and he sat up even straighter, and his chin tipped up when he replied, why, yes, I would enjoy more conversations with you too. Then he said, this is how Ken talks with me. Well, Ken was the facilitator of his weekly social skills group. I could see it was really supportive for him. I smiled back and I affirmed, yeah, I heard you and Ken talking at group last week. I'd like to hear more about that too. I'm curious, would you be available to help a little guy that lives here? He needs a lot of love and support as he finds his way. And he sometimes gets overwhelmed with disappointment and really needs to know how much he matters and that he's not alone in the world. Rylan took that in and he said, yeah, I know that little boy. And then his face softened as he reflected on that little boy for a moment. And he says, you know, when I know a friend's coming over, I feel so good inside. Like I missed having a friend so much, and I'm so happy. And when I hear he can't come over, it's like a volcano inside. And then he paused again. He thought about it. He says, not really a volcano, more like blowing bubbles in chocolate milk. Yeah. And then he raised his eyebrows and he brightened and he goes, like a bubble inside, that's a 3. And then it grows bigger into a 4 and then a 5. And it nearly bursts, but it doesn't. He goes, yeah, that's it. I was thunderstruck. I said, wow, that is huge. You can tell me this. You've never expressed your inner experience like this to me before. And it really helps me to understand what's happening for you and just how big it feels. And I celebrate that your young man really gets little Rylan and that he's right here, right now, sharing your inner experience with me. He smiled even wider. With joy, he says, I'm getting so integrated, aren't I, Mom? And I agreed as I embraced him in a monster mommy hug. And I said, you bet you are, sweetheart. You bet you are. You know, fresh metaphors and visual imagery, or even poetry, they're forms of resonant language, which allows people to connect with the felt sense of one another. And it empowers us with the experience of sensing that another being fully understands what it's like for us and that they can see us with emotional warmth and generosity. So thanks for being with me here today. Healing you.